Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Sacramento International Sportsman's Exposition. We're glad you're here. We're glad we're not in Denver like we were a couple of days ago. It's nice and warm out here in California, and we appreciate the great weather. I'm Sep Hendrickson, the host of California Sportsman Radio show every Saturday morning from 6 to 8 a.m., where we bring you the top anglers in the state, sharing information with you every week on the air to make you a better angler, to make you catch more fish. Today, we're bringing you this is his first appearance at the International Sportsman's Expo. I have personally seen the video of his seminars, was extremely impressed with it, and he goes into some details that will make so much sense to you. This guy is one of the best sturgeon fishermen I know. I want you to please put your hands together for one of the best in the West, Captain Steve Mitchell with Hooked Up Sport Fishing.
All right. Welcome to the ISC show, guys. And thank you guys all for coming out supporting the California Sportsman Radio show seminar. It's always a pleasure, entertaining and sharing with my fellow anglers and everything. Before I get started, though, I just want to make sure that everybody got make sure you hold your hands up for raffle tickets. You can pass those raffle tickets out for everybody. Yeah, make sure you got your hands up and he'll get the raffle tickets to you. And we'll take it from there. So as you guys all know, I'm Captain Steve Mitchell, owner of Hooked Up Sport Fishing, captain of the Top Gun, in which we are a year-round fishing outfit, fishing for a number of species of fish and fishing out of the Berkeley and the Pittsburgh Marina, right? During the summer months, we're fishing up out of Berkeley. During the fall, winter, and early spring, we're fishing up out of Pittsburgh. But as I said, we fish for a number of species of fish, in which those number of species of fish are sturgeon, striped bass, salmon, rock cod, lingcod, halibut, shark, and then even white sea bass if they even happen to show up in our area or anything like that, Albacore if they even show up in our area. But today, we're going to talk about Delta techniques on how to corral and catch the elusive white sturgeon. All right? Y'all ready for that? All right. Well, I'm gonna try to cram a whole lot into this segment right here for you guys, and I'm gonna give it to you raw and uncut. Unlike most guys, most of the guys, when they get to talking, they don't tell you all the stuff, just enough, right? But I'm gonna try to give it to you all today. Hopefully you guys will be able to take something home with you, and after that, if I can reach one of y'all, I'm gonna feel good that I made you that much more of a better fisherman, all right? So, first of all, you guys do know that there's two different sturgeons in our system, right? There's a green sturgeon and there's a white sturgeon. How do you know the difference? How do you know the difference? He said one is green and one is white. Well, the way you know the difference between the two is the green sturgeon, it has a pointed snout, looks very barbaric, right? Has 3 green stripes down on, has a dark green back top, a yellowish green, white belly, right? And when you look at him, you just know that this thing looks like he'll hurt you if you try to touch him, right? Versus the white sturgeon. The white sturgeon has an all gray back, right? He has an all gray back, solid white belly, and the scoots on them, which are called, what you guys may refer to them as the diamonds, are not as sharp as the other scoots that you would see on a green sturgeon or what have you, right? They're more so dull-like in a sense. But at the same time, this is the fish that we can keep versus the green sturgeon, which is an endangered species. Everybody know that, right? All right, I'm just checking. I don't want to see nobody say, oh, Captain Steve said you could take a green sturgeon out the water and keep it or whatever. But you can't. So when it comes to dealing with a green sturgeon, you have to release it immediately. You cannot even bring it out the water. That's one of the laws and rules, right? So far as looking at, you know, the white sturgeon, there's no way that you could confuse it, you know, from the green sturgeon. And when you look at it at the same time, you notice that his snout is blunted. It's not the same as you would be looking at the green sturgeon that has the pointy snout, right? So there's no mixing it up. These fish live the majority of their life in the ocean, right? And they migrate from here down to the bay and out into the ocean. And the majority of their life, like I said, is spent in the ocean, migrating from here all the way up and down the coast up to like Oregon, the Columbia River, even as far up as up into Washington and everything. And during the summer months, a large group of them, well, mainly all of them in a sense, will come off into the estuaries, mainly all green sturgeon. Not to say that the white ones don't come, because they do too as well, but they'll spend a great deal of their time off in the estuaries like the South Bay or like San Pablo Bay area. And then from there, come around like you could say October, November-ish, those fish will start making their way off into the mouths of the river, right? Once they make their way up into the mouths of the river, they're waiting for the first rain to come. When the first rain comes and it rains pretty heavy, they smell that fresh water, and that's their cue to start making their way upriver, okay? So mainly that's all your breeders and everything. Once they start heading upriver and everything, they'll hang out up there for a little while, and then half of them will break off. Come like around January or so, half of them will break off and start heading back down river. Why do they head back down river? They're heading back down river because there's an annual herring spawn every year. Starts off around like in December and all off into January and everything. So what they normally do is they'll come down for a little while, they'll gorge on salmon, not salmon, but herring and herring roe, and then come around February or so, they'll start making their way back up into the river system. Now between February and June, those fish, mainly the big breeders or whatever, they'll be looking for some warmer water with swift, shallow, rocky areas. Reason being is because that's when they start to spawn, when water temps get up to about 68 degrees or so, right? Once they get up to that point, they'll spawn. It takes generally from about like 11 to 12 days for those fish to, hatch the larvae or whatever. And their survival rate is due upon what the conditions are. If the conditions are right, they may survive. If the conditions aren't right, chances are they may not, right? They'll spend like about 1 to maybe 5 years of their life off into like the mouth of the river or towards like the center of the river. And they'll spend their time up in there feeding on little small things that they can eat, whatever. And then, like I say, they grow about 12 inches per year, right, for the first 3 years. After that, their growth spurt slows all the way down. So they'll probably about the first 4, maybe 5 years of their life, like I say, they'll spend their life right there in the mouth of the river towards the central part of the river. And then from there, they'll make their way off into the estuaries to where when they make their way off into the estuaries, they're juveniles around that time. They'll hang out there for maybe about 2 or 3 more years. And then after that point, they'll start making their annual migration like the rest of the bigger fish out there, start heading out into the ocean and start headed upriver and everything. Up coast and everything, Other than that, I don't really have a whole lot of time, so I'm about to start cramming all this into you guys, and I hope you guys are taking notes or whatever. You can ask your questions at the end of the seminar or towards the end of the seminar. And if I can't answer you right here, you can always come to my booth, which is booth number 3303, okay? So we all know that you have to have a fishing license at the age of 16 and above, right? But at the same time, along with that fishing license, it has to be accompanied by 3 other things, which is 1, a Sturgeon report card, 2, ink pen, and 3, some measuring type of device, tape measure or a ruler, whatever you may have. Why do you need a Sturgeon report card? Sturgeon report card carries your 3 tags in which you're only allowed to keep your fish. You're only allowed to keep 3 fish per year, right? And you're only allowed to keep 1 per day, all right? Other than that, you have to log everything that you catch. That's the whole purpose of a Sturgeon report card, to help Fish and Wildlife keep track of what's going on with our fishery and everything. So it's very important. So everything that you catch, whether it be a shaker, which is an undersize, a slot fish, which is a keeper, or an oversized, which is a fish too big, you have to log it. Don't matter what you catch. If you get caught slipping, Fish and Game will roll up to you. Oh, how you guys doing today? You guys get any fish? Oh, no, we didn't get no fish. We didn't catch anything. We only got a few shorts. He'd be like, oh, well, that's all right. Your luck is seeming like it's all right. You're probably going to get a big one. Well, you know the annual routine. Let me check your licenses and your Sturgeon report card. Everybody happy, go local. I got mine. Everybody pulling it out. Then he said, well, let me see your report cards. And then y'all hand him the report card. And the next thing you know, he plays it off and he says to you, well, so y'all had a little bit of luck. Who caught the little shakers or whatever? And next thing you know, this guy like, well, I got the shakers. Then he says, oh, you did? Well, why didn't you report it? Why didn't you log it on your report card? Oh, I forgot about that. You forgot about it, but now that $500 fine has slapped you upside the head, and you remember now, So it's always important to make sure you log on your report cards any and everything that you catch. If it's a sturgeon, I don't care if it's a green sturgeon, white sturgeon, whatever kind of sturgeon, log it, right? Keep yourself in the clear. Remember the size limit too. The slot size is between 40 and 60 inches. Anything over that 60, I don't care if it's 60 and a quarter, it's an oversized. Don't play yourself and try to hold on to that fish, because you will be caught up, and that fine is hefty. It's not worth it, Throw it back, let it go back. And the reason that the whole purpose of that is just to control the fishery, so we'll be able to keep up with our breeders and everything, right? There's a lot of guys out there that don't go by the rules and everything, and those are the guys who contribute to messing up our fishery and everything. And I'm not telling you to report nobody, but If you know you got a friend like that, just tell them, man, that ain't cool. Because don't you want those fish to be around for your grandchildren and their children or whatever else? Let them know, like, man, this is a delicate fish. It lives to be 100 years old and everything, but at the same time, you know, if you're taking fish out of the water that don't need to be taken out, which is our breeders, of course, that's a problem, all right? So, like I said, the slot size is between 40 and 60 inches. Anything any shorter than 40 inches got to go back. Anything over 60 inches has to go back. If it's over 60 inches and you might think it's a possible keeper, it's all right for you to remove it out the water, but at the same time, you got to use common sense. Does it look like it's way over 60 inches to the point it's over 68? If it is over 68, you have to release that fish. I mean, you got to release it in the water without removing it out. If it's questionable, you're able to bring it out the water and everything, but at the same time, if you realize that it is an oversize, you need to release that fish immediately. Common sense tells me you're going to take a picture of it because that's just what we do. You're going to take that picture, get your picture, release the fish safely. Don't put your hands all off in the gills and everything because that stresses the fish even more so than what you just did when you hooked it and was fighting the fish. All right? So the reason we got these rules is because we don't want to take fish like this. All right? You can see clearly that that's a humongoloid female full of eggs and everything. And if we didn't have the rules, how many of us up in this room would probably be wanting to take that fish to go show it off to our buddies and everything, right? I know half of us up in here would because it's an unbelievable catch, and it's like, man, I need everybody to see this or whatever. But the reason we got these rules is so we don't rape the waters like they did back in the day. Back in the day, you can see that's clearly breeders that's just way too big. Way too big, right? So in the event of you catching the oversized and whatever, it's always good to just take a picture of the fish in the water. Why? Because it's the thing to do for one, but the other thing is you get better pictures when you hanging over the side with the fish right there and got something to gauge the fish off of, which is the boat, right? It kind of look a little bit cleaner to me like that versus you holding it with the regular old sturgeon pose where everybody got to be hard with their picture. You know how they do. You know how everybody do. So I'm just saying. But when you properly got to bring a fish out, if you need to hold the oversized, this is the proper way that you hold it, right? You put your hands up underneath the belly like that and not in its gills or whatever. And then when you go to release it, take your picture real quick. Release the fish in a safe, unharmed manner, and then let that fish go on because we don't want to make that fish miss their spawn. These fish spawn like anywhere from the females spawn every 3 to 7 years. It's not like no striped bass or anything like that. It's different. So what happens is if you stress that fish and that fish don't want to spawn, well, that's fish that we missing out on, a generation that we missing out on, and we didn't have to miss out on it because if you took care of the fish and handled it correctly and let it go safely and unharmed, we probably could have just got another probably, who knows, 300,000-400,000 fish out of that one fish. You'd be surprised how many eggs that they have up in them. But anyway, let's move on along here. Let's talk about planning and prepping. Planning and prepping is very important as far as I'm concerned, right? There's 3 things that you should always have. First is your tide log, because that's going to tell you what's happening out there. Next is your weather app, because that's going to tell you if that day is permitting for you to be out there fishing. And third is going to be your Navionics GPS, right? Your Navionics GPS is going to be told as far as where you're going to be able to fish at according to what your tides are telling you. If you got a big tide, you know good and well. If you got a big tide that's doing too much, you're going to have to fish in some shallow water. If you're fishing in a smaller tide and you know it ain't going to be very much current, you know you're going to be having to sit out there in a deep water. So planning and prepping, you got to plan that. You got to think about all that ahead of time instead of just jumping up and saying, okay, I'm going fishing today, and you just go out there, you don't know what your tides and your current is doing or any of that type of stuff. Next, you're going to have to worry about your gear and your tackle, all right? When you go to your gear and your tackle, you got to make sure everything is right. I'm gonna talk to you guys about my gear, what I like. So all these are my sponsors right here. And as you can see, they all top of the line sponsors. And they make it possible so that when you come on my boat, you ain't using nothing but top shelf gear. This is the same stuff I want to use, so I want you guys to feel comfortable and use the same stuff. Now, that guy on the top, California Sportsman Radio Show, of course, y'all know that was Sepp who introduced me and everything. I owe it all to him. That man right there is the man who put us all up on top. And without him, 50% of the equation is gone, because he's on the radio every weekend talking about us to you guys, letting y'all know what's actually going on with the in the water out there. And at the same time, you guys respond by calling us because you're ready to get on the fish and everything. So I give it up to him, and I tip my hat to him as well. So looking at the gear that we use Phoenix rods, right? We use the Black Diamond and we use the Abyss 808. This one right here in the holder is the Black Diamond 867 medium heavy. It has an extra fast tip. Why are we using rods like this? This is an 808, right? And it's a graphite rod, 8070 graphite glass, and it has a fast tip. Why do we want the fast tip? The fast tip is so we can read the bite. But at the same time, we also need something that has major lifting power when it comes time to land that fish. You want to stay away from parabolic rods, like rods that's all glass. Back in the day, that's what they used to use. But we're talking about today. The technology has changed. You don't even have to use those big giant broomstick rods like they used to have back in the day. If you notice how small these are, how thin they are as far as diameter, they're very light. And this one is even lighter. It's an all carbon rod with strands of graphite up in it, which makes it good. I use this rod right here for my experienced anglers that get on the boat, because they can handle that and they know how to fish with a rod. When I get guys on the boat that haven't really fished that much and don't really know too much about how to use a rod correctly, I put them on this Abyss. Why? Because this Abyss is very durable, and it could take a lot more punishment than what this one right here would take. You get new guys on the boat, they'll high stick your rods sometimes. Some of them will even drop your rods down on the ground and step on them and everything because they just don't understand, This is part of your tools. So, it's a reason that we use certain things for certain people. But both of our rods are paired up with Penn Fathom 15 reels. These are some of the best reels for your buck. I'm here to tell you now. And that's what you guys are going to be able to win today, too, in this raffle. You'll be able to win a setup over $500, which is an Abyss 808 and a Penn Fathom, I think it's a 25. So, and there's a number of other prizes, too, that I got for you guys. But for the most part, these Penn Fathom 15s, these jokers are super smooth, got 20 pounds of drag, got a nice power cranking handle on it, and when you go to casting them, they just glide off no problem. And main thing what you want to look for in a good reel is when the fish start pulling all the line off, the drag. You don't want a reel with a sticky drag. A reel that's going always it's jerking your rod tip is always, it ain't smooth. You want it to be smooth all the time. A sticky drag often will make you lose a fish sometimes, so you don't want that, So stay away from that, but that's the reason why we use these Penn Fathoms. Also, our line that we're using on this is, we use two different lines. This TCB 80-pound test P-line braid, which is another one of our sponsors, or we use 80-pound test 8-strand by Phoenix, right? All right, so moving on along. On top of that, guys, I don't know how many of you guys, I see guys want to get on my boat all the time, and they want to come on there with some eagle claw stuff and all that, and I'm I understand how it is sometimes. If your money is funny, I understand. You got to do what you got to do. But if you can, stay away from it. These snap swivels that we use are 130-pound tests by Offshore Angler. You can buy these by the big packs. The reason I tell you to buy these, and I would really insist on you buying them, is because you do not want to lose a fish of a lifetime to tackle failure, right? Yeah, that gold may be glittering for so long, and then once it snaps on you, you're going to be so mad. So always just make sure that you got something that got a high line rating on it. This is a 135-pound test snap swivels. We also use heavy-duty sliders, right? Reason we use heavy-duty sliders, these sliders are from Big Red Worm. Reason we use heavy-duty sliders is because we use heavy lead. If you notice how big these pyramids are, right? These are 16-ounce pyramids. We don't want our lead down there where it's floating or anything like that, you know? Reason why we say that is because lead really kills. If your lead is on the bottom, your bait is 9 times on the bottom, right? If it ain't, then that means you ain't gonna catch this type of fish that we're fishing for. What happens is if your lead is not heavy enough, your lead, if the current is pushing too hard and your lead is not heavy enough, whereas your tip may be sitting just like that, your lead is down there doing like this. And then what happens is how you check it, you end up pulling up on it, and then you try to feel that little thump from it, you know, hitting back down on the mud or whatever, and you don't feel it, and you're wondering why. It's because you don't have enough lead. So remember, lead kills. And when you got lead on the bottom, your bait is pretty much down there on the bottom as well. We also use these beads. If you notice, I got 2 beads, one on the top of the slider and one on the bottom. The one on the top is just to protect the guide at the top, the tip of the rod. The other one is so that your slider doesn't beat up your knot or whatever, right? And then most of all, when we're talking about our leaders, so we're using 7-knot K-style Kale hooks. That's all we use. We don't use anything else. Don't get me wrong, the guys, you got guys like to use octopus hooks and all that, but we don't care for that because these seem to be super sharp, laser tips, and then they grab even better. And even when you offset them a little bit, they even grab even more so. And we also wrap our own leaders. We snell them. Why do we use that versus the old style cable leaders that everybody else used and everything back in the day? Because it's just like we said, back in the day. That's why. The back in the day stuff, the conception was the leaders needed to be steel because of the scoots on the side of the sturgeon would break the line or whatever, but that isn't true. We're using 80 to 100-pound test leader line, either P line or I use this Offshore Angler, you know, which works out just as well. And we snell our own hooks, right? When we snell our hooks and everything, we come in from the front part and we snell it. We also end up putting on there a bullet weight, which I would suggest all you guys, when you do make your own leaders, if you're gonna make your own leaders, make sure that you do apply a bullet weight on there. Why do you use the bullet weight? The bullet weight helps keep your bait down on the bottom, all right? If you didn't have it and you're in kind of like a swift moving current or whatever, your bait wouldn't be fishing right. Your bait would be down there in the current doing like this. And could you imagine seeing a sturgeon down there looking like he's bobbing for apples? Head moving all over the place like trying to grab your bait or whatever? It ain't happening. Make sure that you have some type of lead on there, some type of bullet weight. It don't even have to be a bullet weight. It could be an egg sinker on there. And just remember, it can't exceed over a half ounce. So we use anywhere from 1/4 ounce to 1/2 ounce. And then when it comes to the top of the leader, instead of putting on like barrel swivels, which some people just going to spend the money for the barrel swivel, we just tie perfection loops, right? What happens also when you snell it the way we snell it, right? Every time that fish hits it and he starts to pull away from it, watch what this hook does. this hook starts to dig every time I pull on it. And the more he pulls on it, it's going to just keep on digging. It'll keep on spinning down. Well, as you can see how I was holding it or whatever. It'll dig. It'll just keep on digging. And that's the whole purpose of snelling your hooks like that, so that in the end, if you end up losing the fish, it was because he probably wasn't hooked all the way, you know. So other than that, make sure that you also make your leaders very short, because it'll fish effectively a lot better than it would be if you was using anything that was really long. Our leaders is the minimum length, which is the legal length, legal minimum length, which is 18 inches. You could go bigger than that if you want to, but we don't choose to because of it fish is more sensitive, and you can see the bite a lot better versus having a long leader that's all the way out here dangling or whatever, you know. And when a fish does bite with a shorter leader, you always see it come across the tip or what have you. All right. Last but not least, we also use these. Can anybody tell me what this is in my hand? What? Huh? It's a leader extension. Why do we use these? We use these for in heavy grass waters, like say you're dealing with heavy grass or whatever, and you're trying to find a spot to where you could like possibly fish, but everywhere you go looking for fish, you're seeing grass all over the water, so you don't have no choice but to deal with the grass. Well, what the extension does, the extension gives you junctions, which allows your bait to be able to fish and not get covered up by the grass. So what happens is the grass is coming down a water column, and every time as it comes down a water column, it's hitting your line. As it hits your line, it starts to slide down. All right? Well, you got the first leader that's tied to your main line, and also your weight is right there. That's going to catch some of the grass, right? But if you didn't have no extension, some of that grass is going to make it past that, and when it makes it past it, it's going to cover up your bait. Now your bait ain't fishing effectively no more because it's all covered up. Now that's where the extension comes in. Instead of you having the leader hooked up to your main line, you have the extension on your snap swivel on the main line, which creates more junctions, right? So now the grass is sliding down, it hits your weight and your snap swivel first. Okay, once it hits that, that's where the grass is at there. If it makes it past that, it hits the next junction, which is your next snap swivel. And it also keeps your bait down there fishing still because it ain't getting covered up. So whenever you guys off in heavy grass areas and you don't know how to, stop it to where you can't, stop your bait from being covered up, just make an extension. These are easy. It ain't nothing but another 18-inch leader, but with a snap swivel on it versus the hook with the knot on the top, a perfection loop right here on the top, and that's it. All right? Let me move on along. This is the same pound test. He asked, what pound test is this? It's the same pound test as the leaders, anywhere from 80 to 100. See how that extension is? See how the extension is right here? It's connected on. But then you see the bait down here, but the weight and everything is up there. That's the whole purpose of what you want to do. You want to be able to cover that up. Now, if this bait was right here and there wasn't no extension, this little strand right here possibly could be covering that bait up, right? But being that you got the extension, it doesn't cover anything up. Your bait is still fishing effectively down there, right? So that's the whole purpose of an extension. Let's talk about tides and areas, how important tides and areas are. Tides, when I look for a tide to go fish, my ideal tide, I'm looking for like 4 feet of water movement and better, right? Really, sturgeon fishing, you really like big tides, big minus tides or whatever. But the tides do a couple of things. First, let's get it straight. Tide is nothing but the water coming up and down. What's more important to me is the current speed. That's what matters to me. Why? Because that determines where I'm going to be able to fish at. If I got a big tide and that water's going to be ripping, I know that I can't really fish in no deep water. I'm going to have to find some type of shallow, medium to shallow water spot to go fishing in. If I'm sitting up in a deep water spot and I'm trying to fish with a heavy tide, chances are I'm not going to catch no fish. Why? Because the tide is ripping. It's almost like me saying, I'm telling my buddy JoJo, I'm saying I'm going to sit a sandwich right here on the stand in the middle of the room, and I want you to sprint from here to that boat. But in the midst of you sprinting, that sandwich is right there. I want you to take a bite out of it. He couldn't do it because he's moving way too fast. Could you imagine that? He couldn't do it. He could take a snap at it, but his chances are he's not going to get it. Well, that's the same thing that's happening with the dang fish down there. The tide is moving so fast, it's pushing the fish really fast to the point that the fish got to work hard and he can't grab your bait. So what is that fish going to do? That fish is going to do the same thing that you need to do. He's going to get up out of that deep water and move over to some shallower water. He's going to find some shallow water or an eddy or something like that where he doesn't have to exert that much energy. He's going to look for like something where he can feed on a clown bed or whatever. And then once that tide slows back down, he starts losing current up in there, he's going to go right back out there into that deeper water. And that's the same thing you should do. Because why? Sturgeon bite at the beginning of a tide and they bite at the end of a tide, right? So being that they bite at the beginning and the end of the tide, those are your windows to catch your fish. Sometimes, don't get me wrong, depending on what the current is doing, sometimes they'll bite the whole current, the whole tide, because the tide ain't moving that dang fast. But you have to be able to look at your tide book and know what type of tide to use to determine that. Now, if it was a tide like this one right here, 3.9 to a 2.7, that's actually way, way too small for me. But this is a small tide right here. I know if I'm sitting in a tide like this and I was basing my time to go out fishing on a tide looking like a 0.9 to a 3.9, that's only 3 feet of water movement, right? But also I'm looking at the speed right here. Right here from the gate, that's only moving 2.6 knots. That's like halibut tides. You know how that's slow enough where the fish can get to your bait and you can make that happen for them. And that fish can eat all day on that tide. And if I set up on a tide like that, I'm going to be in some deep water off top. All right? So it's always important to make sure that you know how to read your tide log and make sure that you know what your current speed is doing more so. That's what makes the biggest difference. Always look for a good tide, though, moving like 4 feet of water or better. That's how you should choose your days or whatever. When I start talking about areas like the spots that we like to fish, we start off like in October after we end our salmon season or whatever. And when we do, what we do is we end up going up to Pittsburgh, and which that's where I operate out of during the fall and winter months, right? When I do, we start off in deep holes up there. Why do we start off in deep holes up there in the Pittsburgh area? Because for one, water temp plays a role. The water temp is too warm. So when a water temp is too warm and you got over 60-degree waters, those fish is looking for a spot to go off and chill in. So where do they chill? They're going to go off into deep holes. Well, up there in Pittsburgh, where we start off at, that's what's up there. 85, 90-foot deep holes up in there. And that's where the majority of those fish is going to be. So we'll start off up there. We'll fish all of Chain Island, Broad Slough, the PG&E plant. And then once the water starts to cool off, like towards like mid-December, start cooling off or whatever, we'll start sliding down towards Middle Grounds, Honker Bay. We'll end up in Big Cut, Little Cut, and also around the Fleet area too. Because why? Because the shallower water will warm up faster than the deeper water, all right? So these are things that you need to make a note of when you're going out and you're trying to pay attention to spots that you want to fish. First, look at your tide and see what kind of current you got, and also pay attention to your water temp. If it's too cold, go to that shallower water. And make a note, too, sometimes, I'm going to tell you something about water temp. Sometimes it could be cold, right? And so you thinking to yourself like, man, I need to find some shallower water to get in. I'm on a big tide, but I know this water out here in the deep is pretty dang cold. And then maybe I hit the medium shallow water, and I'm noticing the temperatures rise up. But then at the same time, then I go to the shallower waters, and I notice that I got a little bit of wind chop, and I notice that the water is a little bit colder in that shallower water. Normally, the shallower water will warm up first. It'll warm up fast, right? But if you got wind chop, it'll keep the water from warming up. And so you notice that the water in the medium depth is a little warmer than what you've seen in the shallows. Go back over to that medium depth and start trying to fish that, because just like you went back over to it, those fish are going to go back to it too, because they want to be in something a little bit warmer as well. What happens when they're in that cold water, the fish get lethargic, and they don't really want to be active and moving and everything. So they're looking for the warmer water because it's easier for them to, acclimate up in that, and it's better for them in a sense. So always pay attention to that. Let's talk about setting up. Setting up is really, really, really critical. And this is something that I really want to talk to you guys about. We see these guys all the time, man. We're charter boats. We be out there before everybody else, and we see everybody come out. And what do half of the weekend warriors do? No offense to nobody in here, but what do half of them do? They'll see a charter boat. Instead of going to look for the fish and hunt, which to me, the hunt is real. That's all a part of sturgeon fishing, hunting for the fish. These guys will pull up. Oh, I see Captain Steve over there. Oh, there's Jay Lopes over there. Oh, it must be some fish over here. We're going to just drop the pick right here. So that's what they'll do. That's a no-no, because these fish travel on contours, all right? And when they travel on contours and everything, these are contour lines. See those lines all up in there? Contour lines are chains of depth, all right? So fish choose these certain contour lines as highways that they'll migrate on year in, year out. You mark those spots where you notice that it's like a sturgeon highway where these fish are always moving. It's important for you to know where these fish are at, so therefore when you do see them, you want to set up on some fish. When you do set up on them, you want to come out, find your own fish. Don't try to sit up on anything that I'm sitting on, because it may be a slim little path that I'm sitting on, and the fish are right up underneath me or around me, probably 15 to 30 feet on each side, and that's the zone that they're at. But you coming out sitting next to me thinking you're going to get some because you see me there, no, that's not going to happen. Sometimes, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen. Take your time. Find your fish. Use your navionics, right? Start combing over the ground. Zigzag over them or drive your straight lines. When you start marking your fish, start dropping waypoints on your fish. I'm going to tell you how critical it is and why. Start marking waypoints on your fish. When you do, what happens is, so just say you on this part right here, it's about 30 feet. All that up in there is all about 30 feet. So you marking a fish here, 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 here. So you know they're in that 30-foot contour. So if you're going to set up on those fish and you see they're all in a straight line, what would you do? Main thing you would do is slide your boat down there in front of them. Make sure that you got, a soft bottom right there where those fish possibly are feeding or whatever, because you don't want to set up on no hard bottom. Just because you've seen a hard bottom, you've seen a bunch of fish right there, don't mean they're feeding. Hard bottom is not a clam bed. Soft bottom is mud, which clams live in the mud, right? Don't drop on your fish. You hear guys say, oh, I drop right on their head, man, if I see them right there. No, don't drop right on their head. Why? Because these are very skittish fish. You drop the anchor right there in big water on these fish right there, what happens? They scram off. Now you got to wait for them to come back if they want to come back. Don't do that. Drop down in front of them, drop your pick, which is the anchor, set up in front of them. When you set up in front of them, they're already in a straight line on that 30-foot contour. They're going to come through your spread. There's no reason in the world that you should not get them, right? Especially if you got bow rods out. If these are feeding fish that you stopped on, your bow rods is likely to get smacked first, all right? So you set up on them, and like I say, if they're in a straight line, you set up on them in a front and dropping down in front of them in a sense. Now, if you're not in a straight line, you're zigzagging, but you're marking all the fish and you see them all scattered out. How do you set up on them then? They're on all different contours and everything, so you can't really set up on them that way. The way you want to set up on them, instead of dropping down in front of them, you want to place your boat in the middle of them. You want to put it right in the center of all those different fish that you mark, because they're all scattered out. They're not in no one specific path line or anything. So once you center your boat, next thing you know, you got rods all fanned out around you from the back end. You got your bow rods out and everything. Those bow rods start getting tagged. You already know that good and well you're probably about to, really start getting lit up and everything. And remember one thing, guys, I noticed a lot of guys don't use bow rods. Bow rods catch 85% of your fish. Why? Because the anchor rope is in the front of your boat. These fish can hear that water cutting across that anchor rope, right? So as they're coming down, they don't come down with their nose down in the bottom. They're coming down backwards. The current is pushing that way. They're coming down with their head like this, right? But when they hear that water cutting across that rope, they break off to the sides. Some of them will come up underneath the boat, but a lot of them will break off to the sides. Your bow rods is fanned out to the side with heavy lead on there, and they're sticking back there for a reason. They'll catch everything, like I said, 85% of your fish. Why? Because those are the first baits that the fish going to see. Then everything in the back end up getting tagged. So always, like I just said, place your boat in the center of, the fish, and think of it like this. If you had a hot dog stand, right? Common sense would tell you, you ain't gonna set your hot dog stand up in a back alley and all the main traffic's on Front Street, right? You probably wouldn't get too many customers, right? Only somebody who's walking down the block and you hoping that the center of your hot dogs attracts some more people to come spend some money. But they ain't coming because it ain't hardly nobody back there. But if you put it on Front Street with the fish, the people, you put it on Front Street with the people, they're going to smell your hot dogs. Not only are they going to smell your hot dogs, they're going to see your hot dogs. So it's visual, it's smell, all that plays a role. So presentation is everything. Put your bait out there where it's supposed to be, and you will be picked up. Don't go setting up on me or the next charter boat that you see, or don't even go setting up on the first two fish that you end up seeing. Oh, there's two fish. Oh, we're going to drop right on them. No, don't do that. Take your time. Find out where the fish are. And what's important, here it is, guys. Listen to this. It ain't about where you see those fish at. It's about knowing where those fish is going to end up at once you set up. That's what determines how you're going to catch the fish. Otherwise, you won't catch them. You'll steadily be out there just spinning your wheels or twiddling your thumbs and wondering why you're not getting bit. Another thing is, too, if you're sitting on fish that don't want to bite, don't be afraid to move. That saying they say, why move on fish? Why move from some fish when you got fish up underneath you? You shouldn't be moving. Well, that's bull. I say you should be moving because certain groups of fish don't want to feed, Certain groups of fish might just be in transition. So you need to pick up and pull. And don't let being that you don't got a windlass be the reason because you feel like I'm not pulling that anchor again and breaking my back. That will be the reason for a lot of us to not even pull an anchor and just get lazy and sit there and try to just, wait it out and hope for Dear Mary to come through. Note that you have to make moves. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 moves before you find that right group of fish that really want to feed. And once you get your rods all spread it all out, next thing you know, you're hooked up and you start getting multiple bites or whatever. Sometimes I might move 3 or 4 times in a day to make it happen before I even get a fish. But that's what it takes sometimes. You got to give it some time. I bait up like 3 times. I give it about 25 to 30 minutes. After the third time that I bait up, if I ain't getting bit, I'm going to pick up and I'm going to move. If it's wintertime and the water is kind of cold and everything, I know the fish is a little bit lethargic. Well, in my mind, then that tells me that it ain't telling me that the fish don't want to really feed. It just tells me that I may need to give them a little bit more time for them to get to my bait because the water is kind of cold and they really ain't moving all like that or what have you. But at the same time, if I don't get bit after a certain amount of time after that, I'm going to pick up and I'm going to move. So that's something that everybody should be paying attention to. Now, when I'm looking at fish and I'm trying to set up, right, I'm definitely not trying to set up on fish up here that's suspended in the water column like that. I'm looking for a fish that's on the bottom, like that fish right there. This fish may be possibly on the bottom. I'll put my bottom zoom on it, but this might be a fish right here on the bottom. That's definitely one on the bottom. And that, to me, at the same time, if you notice, look at the bottom right there. You see how it's red like that? If it was yellow like that, all that yellow right there, that indicates that that's a hard bottom, you know? The fish may be just in transition passing over that. But at the same time, if it's red like that, that red determines that that's mud. That's a soft bottom. Could possibly be a clown bed or something that they're feeding on. You see the fish are down there on the bottom and everything. When I'm looking for fish and I'm on my meter, I'll ride around for hours sometime, but I really be looking for fish like this. See how that fish is just on the bottom like that? To me, that says, oh yeah, that's a feeding fish right there. And if I can find a few of them like that, oh, I'm definitely going to slide down on them. Or if they all scattered out, I'm going to definitely get in the middle of them and drop my pick, and hopefully I'll have fish on. So when you're looking at your meter, make sure you know you're reading it right. Don't settle and drop down on suspended fish and hoping like, oh yeah, it's almost the end of the tide. He's probably going to drop down and start feeding. That's gambling. Don't do it. Learn how to do it the right way, and you'll start, practicing good measures and start coming up with more fish and everything. These are sea anchors. We use these right here. We use those to just help stabilize the boat, but it also tells us another thing. It tells us what the current is doing. If that current is ripping really fast, it's going to be pulling all over those buckets, and you'll be able to see how the water is hitting. When the water starts to slow up, you're going to see how the buckets start to dangle back. As you can notice, those buckets right there, look at the rope. The rope has a small sag to it. That means because the water was just moving kind of slow there, which is where the fish can feed in, which is always good. But also, when it comes slack tide, those buckets are turned all the way upside down until you don't got no current there. So they serve a number of different purposes and everything. As you can see how the spread is that we got right here off the back and everything. When you're in deeper water, you don't have to cast that far or anything, but you do want to have your your rods all spread out with heavier weights on the outside, your smaller weights during the center, right? Here's a spread right here. Here's the spread right here. In deeper water right here, as you can see, you got the spread where the spread is going off the back, and you're casting shallow, you're not casting that far away. And then in the front, you can see that the bow rods is going back out to the outside. But when you're in shallower water, you can notice that the rods are even spread out even more so and everything. And what I mean by that, you cast them far away from the boat because the boat can hear, the fish can hear everything. They can hear everything that you're doing inside the boat is all amplified up underneath the water and everything. So make sure that when you do cast out that way, you're making sure that at the same time you got everything spread out. My time is running out, guys, so I'm gonna get past the bait. These are the various baits that we use that everybody know. Just make sure when it comes to using the bait and everything, you're using the right bait for the right area, all right? Don't go up into up here in the Sacramento River trying to use herring because it's not a natural bait to be up here. Use the right bait in the right spots or whatever. And these are the normal baits that I'm sure everybody already know about. Last but not least, I want to just get to you guys about the bite. We do something called the reel down technique, right? When I say the reel down technique, That's the way that we set the hook now versus the old traditional way of swinging the hook and everything. I mean, swinging to set the hook. What happens on the reel down technique is, the fish will hit it, right? Instead of you running up to it and swinging on it like you normally would, you'll reel down on this fish. How do you reel down on the fish? You see the bite, you end up getting a one peck or whatever. The next thing you know, you start seeing him pumping on it, he's starting to weigh in on it, and he's on your rod tip. I'm eating your bait. That's how they do 3 or 4 times, right? Next thing you know, he's pulling your rod down, and you see that, and you're standing up here, and the minute that rod tip starts to bend down, you start to burn your reel. And what happens is, as you see, the rod tip is loading up. Now look, I'm still reeling on it, but at the same time, it's not going nowhere, right? At that point in time, so as it's locked down or whatever, you'll notice that your rod tip is bent down, you got the fish hooked. At that point in time, you start fighting your fish and everything, pulling up and reeling down on it. I would love to share more with you guys. I told you guys I was going to try to cram a whole lot into nothing, but I'm out of time right now, guys, and that's pretty much my presentation to you guys. I hope somebody got something up out of it and everything.
All right, that was awesome. And
All right, everybody, there you have it. Sturgeon fishing with Captain Stephen Mitchell on Hooked Up Sport Fishing. Hey, thanks for a good time today, man. Appreciate it. Good job. Hey, do yourself and your buddies a favor. Hook up with Steve and go out and do some fishing. Why don't you tell them how to get a hold of you and stuff?
Yeah, guys, I can be reached at 707-655-6736, or you can look me up on Facebook or Instagram, or even on Google or whatever. Saturday mornings I'm on Sep Hendrickson's California Sportsman Radio show, so you can listen and find out what's actually going on. And like he said, do yourself a favor. If you guys want to catch a trophy fish, give me a call. These fish are definitely out here biting. I don't sit up here and blow smoke and just talk like, you know, it's actually happening when it's not. When I tell you something, it's actually the truth, and that's it. It's raw and uncut. And as I told these guys today, we were going to get out there and get on them, and definitely we made that happen within a matter of time. Triple hookup, which was absolutely just awesome. Then we end up with another oversized right after that. Our tides switched up on us. Our conditions was just way beyond normal. But, you know, being with an experienced guide, of course, you end up learning a few things, and we end up making it happen today. So, yeah, high five on that one.
Hey, what do you got coming up next? You know, how long are you doing the sturgeon season, and then what's coming up after that?
Okay, so, yeah, we'll be doing this until about the 1st of May, 2019. And then, well, to the end of this month, and then the 1st of May, we move back down to Berkeley. We'll be doing our halibut trips, our halibut, striped bass, live bait potluck trips, and we're taking reservations for that right now. And if you guys thought that sturgeon fishing was fun, wait till you get out there on the bay and try to get to, you know, soaking a few rods for some halibut, which is definitely good eating. So I'd advise you guys, if you guys want to get in the books, give me a call and try to get up on the best title dates, because those dates will get sucked up really fast. And then, of course, you got the other dates that's still lingering on, and you guys can still get halibut on those dates as well. But the better dates, you should call and try to get your reservations going now. July 1st, we'll be starting our salmon trips too. So if you guys want to get in the books for salmon fishing, give us a call. That number, once again, is 707-655-6736. And like he said, we fish year-round. We do not stop. We just keep it going. And if you thought this was some fun or watching this video right here, just join us out there on the water, on the ocean, and see how much fun that is, you know. So until then, man, I'm going to hang loose.
That's right. Get out there and get you some. Thanks again, Steve.
That's what's up,
all right, man. Hey,
all right.
Don't forget, y'all stay fishing. I'm out.
Look at this cat.
Yeah.
Right.
I see y'all.